I'm Pooja, your host for today's webinar. First of all, thank you for joining us. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Lalit Bhatt. Lalit is a CTO at Entitle and has been a leader in designing both SaaS and AI-based applications in the industrial sector for over a decade. He's an industry expert who has an exceptional grasp of technology and its applications for machinery manufacturers. He's also very vocal about his insights on the technology industry and often shares fascinating content about AI on LinkedIn. With that, over to you, Lalit.
Thanks, Pooja, and good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, whoever from different parts of the world. So just to set the baseline for what we are talking about today is, we'll generally just touch upon what aftermarket, what people in the aftermarket, what leaders, what different personas in the aftermarket care about, and what are the problem statements we see, why, where the technology landscape stands today, and then what Gen AI, what kind of possibilities will the Gen AI is bringing into the whole system, especially with the new agents kind of thing that are possible now with the newer Gen AI technology. So let's start with some of the baselines, like when we talk about aftermarket, what are the important things that the team, the aftermarket managers or the aftermarket leaders care about? So essentially what happens is that usually the aftermarket is seen more as a function that needs to be there because an equipment sale has happened. And usually one of the criterias when equipment sale has happened is when a customer is buying it, they definitely looks for how strong is the after sales and service kind of thing. And that's where mostly the notion of the aftermarket has evolved a long time. But we have also seen that the organizations who are more proactive about this one, they know that aftermarket is actually beyond that. The profitability margins are much higher. It's a way to build deeper relationship with customers. And when time comes, it's also a way to sell newer equipments when replacements or expansions are happening on the customer side. So if we talk about in general, the aftermarket growth essential, it's more about like having a good handle on where my installed base is, what we call it the installed base visibility. Do I have a complete visibility of each kind of assets, where they are located, in what stage of the life they are, what kind of part consumption is happening out there, what kind of purchase patterns are happening, under what kind of service contracts they are. And this is usually what we call as sort of get captured around the system of records, or we generally tend to like, though what we have seen is that it's still mostly sitting inside a lot of spreadsheets and things like that, but essentially there is itself a value in terms of bringing that data together, unifying it, and building a picture which helps in proactively targeting the installed base. Then once that has happened, then what it leads to is that you can start surfacing the sales opportunities. The upsell and cross-sell becomes possible, and the excess parts inventory can be handled in a much more cleaner way. But what we are seeing also is that this is like one of the data-driven approach, but then there are a lot of workflows that also become important, especially order management, service and support, asset health checks, or warranty management. And aftermarket usually becomes very interesting from one perspective, is that in new equipment sales, you're generally dealing with the latest generation of the equipment, or maybe like one or two generations going backwards. But aftermarket is very, very interesting, and it's much more complex and much more complicated, just because of the fact that aftermarket team is dealing with machines that are sitting out there, which has been sold like 5 years before, 10 years before, or even 20, 30 years before. So we have seen situations where there are like machines even 30, 40 years back out there, still in service, still needs parts and things like that. And still have huge sorts of that revenues and profitability margin that the aftermarket parts and sales and service do bring on the table. Broadly what we call as the wallet share as well. And the typical challenge that we have seen is, I'm sure a lot of you would be able to relate to that one. This is one of the biggest struggle of aftermarket. There's a lot of data that is sitting all over the systems. If you want to do anything meaningful, it needs a lot heavy data lifting that needs to happen before any useful analytics can be done. It's usually very time consuming. And usually it also happens is that with, especially with organizations which have large installed base, there are typically like those IT departments and those things where this whole analysis, when the request goes up, it takes a lot of time even before any meaningful results come back. And by that time, even those become stale. And then this becomes compounded with the fact that there is still a lot of information now sitting in unstructured data, which is like service reports, PDFs, a lot of spreadsheets, notes, emails flying all across. So just try to paint the picture. If you see that this whole data scattered all around, and then there is a lot of this, what we call as tribal information, or what we call as like uh, some person know it because they have been in that situation, but that knowledge is captured either in their heads or in such archaic format that it becomes very difficult to make sense of these information together and tie them together. And that's where what we are seeing is that that's where the problem is started happening. And it is also because the market is also shifting. The customer of today is much more aware. They have too much of information. The expectations are too high. And then on the other hand, we are seeing that the systems are becoming more complex, not only on the data side, even the equipments are becoming more complex. If we have seen that like equipments have changed their nature as well, like we used to see, if you look at the mechanical industry, like the equipments mostly would be mechanical in nature, but now there's a lot of electronics have started coming in. Then we see that there's a lot of connectivity that has started happening with IoT and all those notions. So systems are becoming much more complex. Equipment in itself are becoming too much complex, and they need a different level of treatments to get a good handle over their life cycle. And then I'm sure, I think we all know that the workforce problem is always a huge problem. Don't get good resources, or the people who are there who understand it are on the verge of retiring. And all these things do compound these situations. So now let's take a step back. What industry has done to deal with that one? We have seen a huge digital transformation effort, and which has been mostly has been fixated or focused around what we call a system of records, or what we call as structured data as well. So what you do is that you bring this meaningful data, put it in a data model, and then you have some APIs built on top of that one, and the data is exposed in some meaningful way, either through dashboards or through workflows. So, and it has served this purpose. I'm not saying that like it has also taken the industry to a greater heights in terms of the ability to collaborate and ability to give insights about their installed base or in general about a lot of their aftermarket operations. But one problem that happens still here is that in spite of having so much structure of the data, there is still a lot of information that goes through crack. The sentiment of the customer. If we read any service ticket and reports kind of thing, sometimes you would see that there is a bunch of rich amount of information sitting out there in terms of the health of the asset, what they are looking for, what the pain points are they getting engaged, or they are looking disengaged now. So all those things, information is present there in some form in emails or those kind of things, but there's no way to figure that out. And that's where the structured data are unable to bring that analysis or that insight beyond that point. And that's where what we have seen is that where this shift in the technology started making change. What it can do is that it has the ability now to figure out that next level of insights, just looking into more what we call as like the human kind of information, thinking in a human way and trying to create a sort of sense of where the customer is going in a more human way. And that's where I'm sure, I think a lot of you guys would have I think almost everyone now uses tools like chat GPT and things like that. And the difference that we are seeing with this newer kind of technology, what we call a large language models, is that they think and act more like human. And the key of this whole puzzle is not just to look into the LLMs, but to marry it with the structured data in such a way that together they create a much better insight about how the customer is behaving, what next to do with the customer, where the next pain point is, or where the next opportunity is. And that's the kind of architecture or the model that we are putting in place, basically, where you see that on one side we have all this what we call as like the installed base data as well, where you will see a lot of structured data coming into picture. So for example, when we talk about structured data, you know that where is this equipment installed, what are the different parameters of that equipment that can be captured, and then what is sort of the age of the equipment, what are the service contracts attached to it, what are the different parts consumptions, what is the bill of material, the edges bill of material, or the bill of material at that point of time attached to that asset. So all those information becomes a structured part of the data. But then what we do is that start marrying with the unstructured part of the data. For example, looking into manuals, which would help in building a very stronger asset life cycle, a notion of asset life cycle. So for example, if I know that this asset is at this age, which my structured data tells, but then I can get into the manual, my LLMs can get into the manual and tell me that, okay, if you are at this stage of the life cycle, and if I look into some other parameters like duty cycle, if they are available, I can tell, looking into those manuals, the LLM can tell that, okay, I think this is the next set of steps, this is the next set of service requirement, or these are the parts that needs to be looked into, these are the parts might be end of the life. This now becomes a very it becomes very insightful in terms of providing directions what to do next now with that asset, and not just assets now, with the different assets that are at that location, or which are the similar assets across different locations. But essentially where the power is coming is that the power is coming because we are able to now merge these two insights together in a more meaningful way and give better superior insights on that one. So hopefully I think it's all probably making sense in terms of like what we've achieved till now when we talk about the systems of record, and where the things are going with this whole new, large language models capabilities, and how synthesis, which is more important thing, is that the ability to synthesize them together to generate more meaningful information. So maybe before we do go ahead, maybe Som, can you just, we just thought that we'll just do a small poll just to figure out what you folks are thinking in terms of where do you see Gen AI making the biggest difference in the aftermarket landscape? So maybe we'll just give a minute and then. So I guess, should we close the poll? Okay, interesting. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, that's what we are also seeing, that I think, and these places are more interesting because what we are also seeing is there is a lot of this unstructured pieces also going out in this place, especially in the order management. So we'll touch upon the two of the use cases, I think, a little bit more detail. But yes, where we see a lot of what we call as information flying all around, more in human kind of formats. That's where there's a lot of difference that with the LLMs and the Gen AIs can come into place. So some of the agents that we are actually working with customers right now is, in fact, that's one of the places that we are seeing like a lot of traction going on is around order processing. What happens currently is that the order would come in mail. Someone would manually go through the mails and find the relevant pieces to code. Then they go through multiple systems based on different organizations, but what they will try to do is that find the right part number, check what is the status in the inventory, what is the price catalog for that customer, if there is a specific price catalog, what kind of discounts, quotes, all these things, all these pieces of information has to be assembled together, and then a quotation is created, which is based on approval, then it's sent to the customer. But where the LLM changes in the picture is that what would happen now is that the email would come as part of, so the order email would come in some of the mailbox, but what would happen now differently is that the LLMs would immediately pick it up because they have been trained. they have been trained on past emails, they have been trained on other data sets of the organization, so that they can make sense of that particular email and they can actually generate the first level quotation. And then what we can do is that we can start marrying it with the structured data. We can start looking into those pieces of information, making sure that we confirm them with other set of pieces from the system of records. And then that system, the agent will automatically create a final quotation. And based on the approval system and all, that would go to the customer for approval and for generation of PO. So if you really see what is happening now here is that there is a marriage that is happening between the structured and unstructured data. There's the LLM coming into picture, which understands the way humans, because the thing is that again, when these kind of orders come, they come in all format, sometimes even in different languages, with all kind of ways it is written. But that's where the power of LLMs comes into picture. They are able to process that because they have been trained to do that one, and that not only saves a lot of labor, but it also is much better in terms of generating the data pieces out of it and making it ready for the processing further, so that the quotation is created. So that's where what we are seeing the order processing is going. That's what we are working with our customers to basically create these kind of agents in their system. We already usually have a lot of this installed base data put into place for them. So now bringing this whole thing into picture, this agent system, actually the turnaround times becomes much better out here, which is another win that happens with our customers. Then the other places where we are seeing is the service report analysis. Right now, usually what we've seen is that service report is created either on a spreadsheets or PDF documents, and they are attached as notes into their FSM systems, and it contains a lot of interesting information. But usually they just remain there because either someone is motivated enough or someone is tasked to do that. Mostly what happens is that otherwise this ticket just live out there till someone goes is planning to go to that customer next time. They would just like probably go and check out what has happened last time. Then probably they would see that information. But mostly they just like are created and put in some format at some places, and they just remain there. But that's where now all this LLMs would start making the difference. What it would do is that once they get the ticket, they can fetch this information from the tickets. Usually that is more of a structured part many times in the ticket. If not, LLMs can come into picture. But with a combination of basically the structured data and this whole LLM, what we can do is that we can actually start figuring a lot of information out. We can figure out the service intervals. We can see what are the replacement rates that are happening, because once we start looking into the volume of the tickets that are at the same time, different organizations, different cases, some get 100, some get thousands. But what is more important is that the systems can look at from a holistic perspective. They can start figuring out the service intervals, the replacement rates. They can see that what are the major problems that are trending up or down. They can even figure out that, okay, something is trending down. They can cohort that set of equipments or set of locations where it is happening, and they can proactively actually reach to the similar locations or similar assets for the recommendation and those kind of things. And that's where a lot of this cross-sell and service opportunities would start happening. So yeah, so that's where we are seeing, that's what we are working with customers, that we are seeing a lot of, we have focused more on aftermarket. We are seeing the same thing. I'm sure, I think you'll realize that this is the same thing is the agentic systems are happening all over in different domains as well. But this is like, we have been mostly focused on the aftermarket. So that's why we have been focused more on the aftermarket use cases. So just to sum up, where the power comes is the ability to unify the structured and unstructured data, and the LLMs which will come into picture. They can get trained on these different unstructured pieces of data information that is available all across the organizations, which sort of provides a human-like intelligence, both in terms of understanding it and then outputting the information that is meaningful. And that's where I think a lot of the next level of insights starts happening on the aftermarket side of the things. So yeah, Pooja, I think that's what I plan to cover. Hope
Great.
this was useful to the participants today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lalit. That was fantastic. Very insightful. We do have some questions from the audience.
Sure.
The first question is, does your install base management program integrate with modern ERPs?
Yes. So the install base, what we have got is we have built it right from the beginning with an open architecture. So there are a couple of ways to do that. We have open APIs which integrate with ERP. And again, what we do is that we also take a lot of data. We can take the data from multiple systems, ERP, FSM, CRM, to create a unified view of the install base, and that data can again be fed back in whatever data models or through APIs. There are multiple ways to do that. Different customers do it in different way, but yes, in simple terms, it they integrate well with any kind of ERPs.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Lalit. Uh, there are a few other questions. The next question is, do you think Gen AI can replace all of tribal knowledge? Is it even possible?
That's $1 billion question, and I think it's not a question just for this forum. It's a probably universal question at this point of time. Personally, I think yes, we are going in that direction. I don't know when and how and to what extent, but eventually, yes, we uh, with the technology, with the way the landscape is evolving, we are seeing uh, a lot of super intelligence getting built into those systems. Whether they will have the same emotions like human or not, or even we can call them emotions or not, that's again a $1 million question. But yes, for all practical purposes, they would behave and act like humans.
It's always a good topic whenever
Yes,
these questions come
yes,
up.
absolutely.
Next question, also interesting, Lalit. I think we do get this a lot. How do I overcome resistance to AI adoption within my team, especially among seasoned professionals?
And I think it's again, I think that's a very valid question. Change management is always very hard. And it's not just about Gen AI. I think any change management is always hard. So what we suggest is that always to start with smaller, try to define very succinct, very clean use cases, smaller use cases, which can give good wins in the beginning, which creates confidence among the teams. They feel more confident about that one. And that's where the journey starts. Trying to boil the ocean, I think that's more harm than helping out.
Yeah, I'd agree, Lalit. And maybe one last question I see, and I do see we have time. How much time and investment is typically required to integrate generative AI into aftermarket workflows?
So usually, I think it's a function of couple of things. One thing is that what kind of model is required basically for uh, doing that kind of work. The second thing is that the training effort, and then the training data. I think these three things basically define those things. But what we are seeing is that with the new model coming into picture, with the new training, this the costs are becoming like significantly they are going on the downward side of the things. But again, I think a good estimate can be provided once we see all the data and things like that. But usually a workable model, what I've seen is that can be brought up in, let's say, 8 to 10 weeks kind of things, which can start doing some of the which can start solving some of the things, some of the initial use cases.
Perfect. It looks like, Lalit, that was the last question. Thank you very much for your time today, Lalit. It
Yeah,
was a great webinar, and a big thank you for everyone who joined us. You can find more information about our solutions by scanning the QR code on the next screen, Lalit, if you can go there. Or you can visit entitled.com where you can sign up for a free trial. That's all for today. Thank you once again for tuning in. Take care, and we appreciate your participation. And of course, we wish all of you a happy holiday season. Have a
yeah.
nice day.
Happy and happy New Year to everyone. Okay. Thanks, Pooja.
Thank you.
Thank you.